Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to continue this morning with something we started last week on escaping the delusions of mind. Now, if you didn't see last week, or if you didn't listen to last week's talk, you'll have to go out to the YouTube channel and pick up on it, because I'm not going to go back and repeat everything that we did last week. But I'll kind of hit a brief recap. But I would just like to say that this is probably these 2 weeks, these ideas that we're talking about, they probably sum up the essence of what I believe our spiritual growth is all about. What it is that we as spiritual beings, we as conscious thinkers, the only conscious thinker in our universe, what it is that we are to do, ought to do, and are capable of doing. We are responsible and accountable for doing. And that is to be aware of what we are thinking, to be aware of what we are believing, and to very aggressively, for lack of a better term, Dr. Holmes calls it, an aggressive persistence to see the truth. That we should aspire to at all times, as New Testament says, pray without ceasing. At all times we should be endeavoring to analyze, to evaluate what is going on in this field of consciousness that we call ourselves. And really ask ourselves, how do I know that's true? How do I know that's true? It's most important. And for one thing, we're the only ones that can do it. No one else can do it for us. No one can come and tap us on the shoulder or wave a magic wand or say a magic word or do those things for us. We have to have the desire. We have to really want to do it. This is why in the East they tell us, don't seek God unless you're seeking God as earnestly as you would be looking for a pond if your hair was on fire. Right? It's not kind of something that you do just here and there a little bit on a Sunday and then go about your week. In this regard, every day is the holy day. Every day is the Sabbath. It's good to take one day a week and set it aside, but eventually you come to realize that one day a week is not enough. This is a 24-hour, 7-day adventure. So Dr. Holmes tells us that we are spiritual adventurers in the unexplored territory of mind. And you and I are the only ones. You and I are the only ones who are capable of going within and becoming aware of what it is that we truly believe. The importance of this is several things come to mind with regards to the importance. First of all, is it's done unto us according to our belief. So we accept that as a starting point. And you find this silver thread, as we called it, this idea flowing through different philosophies and different religions. From ancient Judaism, we're told that as you think and believe in your heart, as a man thinks and believes in his heart, so is he, Proverbs. We're also told in Buddhism that everything we experience is a result of what we've thought. Right? Everything from the world out there comes in through the senses, and then it comes into this nebulous thing we call consciousness, is one way of looking at that. And another way is that our consciousness is cause and what we experience is effect. As Florence Scovel Shinn says, life is a game of boomerangs. What we toss out, we get back. Cast your breads upon the water, and it shall return unto you. My word shall not return unto me void. When you pray believing in your heart that it is so, and it is so. All of these different teachings are in one way telling us, that this thing, this nebulous thing we call consciousness, is a creative force in our lives. Not because it has power in and of itself, but because there is a power that works through it. Power that in religious science we call the law of mind. called by many names. Law of attraction, law of prosperity, law of health. Bottom line is it's done unto you according to your belief. So one reason for us to be earnest about uncovering what it is that we believe is that it is done unto us according to our belief. These are the things that life is made of, right? Keep with diligence all the matters of your heart. It's another place in the Old Testament. For out of it comes the issues of life, the substance of life. And the other thing is that when we can move beyond. Now, beyond is probably not the best word. Perhaps before is the best word. If you think of the order in which things come to pass, that before conditioned mind, before the opinions of mankind, before race consciousness, before our own consciousness starts to act upon consciousness itself, it is there. It is there. There is a consciousness. There is an awareness. There is a perception without a judgment. Right? And again, we're told, judge not by appearances, judge by righteous judgment. There is this isness, this I amness, this suchness that the different religions and philosophies talk about. It is. It just simply is. And it is that state of awareness that I refer to when I say, we want to go beyond. We want to go beyond the human mind. We want to go beyond race consciousness. What we're saying is we want to get back to that, which is really before rather than beyond. I hope that made sense. I hope I didn't lose you there. From the East, we get the image of someone who dropped a valuable jewel into a pond, and they're trying to find it, and they've got their hands in the water, and they're stirring the water up, and they're looking all around for this jewel, and they're stirring up the mud at the bottom. And they can't see that which is right there before them because of their own activity. And if they wish to find that which is already there, they must cease. They must cease all of this striving, all of this trying, all of this thrashing about. And they must let everything settle. The calmness, the stillness. And then that which was there appears. Then it becomes clear. We have so much activity going on in our field of thought. We have so much activity going on within the range of our senses. And it seems like every day it gets to be more and more, with the distractions, the distractions that we have in life, our phones, our TVs, our radios. Everything seems to be vying for our attention. It becomes more and more important for us to be still, to take a break from that. It comes at us so quickly that we don't have time to stop and say, what was that? What is that that's coming into me? And do I know that it's true? Is it important? Is it real? Things come to us in the news, in the headlines. And we just kind of let them in. We just kind of let them in. Let them into our consciousness. Don Miguel in the Four Agreements tells us that, if we don't stop and say no to something, we've accepted it. And there's so much coming at us at all times that we don't really have time to say, no, I don't believe that. I don't accept that. I don't buy into that. It's just boom, boom, boom. It's bombarding us. It's bombarding us. But when we do take the time to allow our minds to settle, when we do take the time to think about what we're thinking about, or critical thinking, how do you know what you know? How do you know what you know? something that most religions discourage. Most bureaucratic organizations discourage, you know. Just do it the way we told you to do it. Don't ask questions. It's right because we say it's right. Logical fallacies of deferring to authority. And at some point we have to start to recognize that our lives are being directed by many things that are just simply not true. Just simply not true. But the human race has come to accept these things as true, and we, because we are part of it, we have come to accept these things as true, and because we get to experience them. And this is another important point Joel Goldsmith brings out to us. He says, don't ever personalize evil. Don't ever start to wonder why it is that somebody got sick or some bad thing happened to somebody, and oh, well, they were thinking this or I was thinking that, you know, and try to figure out what it is, personalize it. We are all subject to these calamities of life, if you want to call them that, because we are swimming in race consciousness. We are immersed in race consciousness. And Dr. Holmes tells us that our spiritual practice is for the purpose of insulating, isolating, and inoculating ourselves from this race consciousness. So what I mean by that is there's this collection of ideas that humanity has formed, and many of them are not so. But we come to accept them. Either actively we come to accept them, or passively, because we don't reject them, we have accepted them. And then our lives play out according to these beliefs that we have accepted. Remember, it's done unto you according to your belief, but it doesn't say that it's done unto you according to those beliefs you are aware of. Right? And we have beliefs that we are aware of, and we have beliefs that we are not aware of. Things that we believe to be true, but we never even stop to question them. They're just such an integral part of our belief system that it never occurs to us to even go back and stop and ask, you know, why would I believe that? Do I believe that? You know, they are our value system. They are our deepest beliefs. They are religious beliefs or philosophies in the world. So we never come to ask them, you know. It's the elephant in the room. It's there. Everybody is acting as if it's there, but nobody's talking about it. So you and I as spiritual beings, you and I are the only ones who have the ability and therefore the responsibility to go in and think about what we're thinking about, and to take specific action to eradicate the false beliefs, the things that we believe to be true that aren't true. So just very quickly along that lines, you can see how ideas come down from generation to generation to generation, and some of them are valuable and some of them are not. So a few years ago we had the tsunami in Indonesia that killed many people, but some of the people who were native to that area, they knew, because they had been taught from the time that they were very little, that if they saw the ocean going out, they saw the water suddenly go out, that they should run away to high ground because the water was going to come back. Right? Now, none of these people in their lifetime had ever lived through a tsunami. In fact, it was hundreds, if not thousands of years since the last time the people who lived there might have seen these things. But this was an important truth. It was an important truth that was handed down through the mythology of those people. You can imagine parents making up stories and telling stories to their children that would impart this great truth, that if the water suddenly goes out, run away from it. See? And they were saved. So this is an idea that was important to the survival of these people, that was embedded in their values. and it was an important one, and it saved some of them. Now, other ideas that we adopt along the way as humanity evolves, other ideas that we adopt may not be true. They may be completely false, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as they're not harmful. Because the purpose of evolution is just to keep life alive. That's what it does. It keeps life alive, keeps life moving forward. Right? Until we get to the point where we reach what Thomas Troward calls the fifth kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, where we can start to recognize that we are a spiritual being, and we can start to analyze what we think about. We can start to align our thoughts more with this thing called God, the isness and the suchness and the I amness. So if, as a group of people were developing in an area, if somebody ate red berries and got sick and died, you can imagine that within that culture there would become stories about that would warn the children against eating red berries. Now, all red berries are not poisonous, but that doesn't matter. See, that doesn't matter. If you don't eat any red berries, you won't get sick and die from eating red berries. So from the point of view of evolution, it was okay to just not eat any red berries whatsoever, instead of trying to figure out which ones you could eat and which ones you couldn't eat. And Dr. Frederick Bales gives us an example of that. He says if you grew up with this belief that red berries were going to kill you, and you suddenly found yourself on an island somewhere, and the only thing to eat were red berries, now you'd start to question that, you know. You'd start to think, well, is that really true that red berries will kill you? And you wouldn't be sure. But if some natives people who live there on this island, you know, native to the island, if they came along and they started eating red berries, then suddenly you would have a different view of the world. You would say, well, maybe not all red berries are bad. Maybe I can eat these red berries. So there comes a time in our growth, there comes a time in our spiritual growth where we have to go back and say, is everything that I believe, whether I believe it at a conscious level or a subliminal level below the level of consciousness, is everything that I believe true? Because really what we want to do, really as we enter into this realm of spiritual awakening, what we want to do is let go of everything and anything that's not true. We want to simply be at home with the beloved, as Dr. Holmes puts it. We want to still the nonsense of the mind, the chatter of the mind. We want to experience the presence of the divine. And in doing so, you know, it's kind of like the dance of the seven veils, and in kind of doing so, as we move closer and closer in consciousness to that which simply is and simply is truth by virtue of its being, we let go of layer after layer after layer of those things that we held on to, those things that we believed. So Emma Curtis Hopkins gives us five areas to look at, and then tells us there's two more, and I'm going to try to touch on all 7 of them briefly today. Dr. Holmes in the textbook tells us that basically all of the problems that we experience in life come from this idea of separation, that we are somehow separated from God, we are somehow separated from our good. The book of Genesis gives us the allegory of the Garden of Eden, you know, and Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and they lived in the presence of God, and then they ate from the tree of the knowledge, not the actuality, but the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil, and they left the garden. See? And there were 2 guards that were posted at the gate to keep them out, to keep them from coming back, because there's another tree in the garden. There's the tree of life, the tree of life. And what this is telling us is that you know, this is more than just a story from a long, long time ago. This is the evolution of our own souls. We were born into this world, and we believe We believe in good and we believe in evil, and we're trying to get back into the garden, to the tree of life. We're trying to escape those ideas. We're trying to escape the delusions of the mind. So the delusions, by that I mean these are ideas that we believe to be true, and we strongly believe them to be true, and yet they are not true, and there's evidence against them. But nevertheless, we persist. We hold on to them. To give you an idea of just how difficult it is for the human mind to let go of these things, is that there was a time when part of the world believed that the earth was the center of the universe, and that it was the sun that revolved around the earth, because the earth was the place where the pinnacle of God's creation, mankind, the highest form of God's creation that they could think of. Of course, they were the ones saying that. Of course, they were the highest. And therefore, when God created the universe, the earth was stationary, and everything else revolved around it. Kind of like we might say today that somebody is very self-centered and they believe the whole world revolves around them. But, you know, around the 1600s, people started experimenting with telescopes, and in the European world, which is where this belief was widely held, Galileo pointed his telescope to the heavens, and he saw Jupiter, and he saw the moons of Jupiter revolving around Jupiter, and that sort of shot down the idea that everything revolved around the earth. They also started becoming awareness, you know, that the sun actually was the center of our solar system, and the earth revolved around the sun. And these ideas were heretical. You know, people were burned at the stake for these ideas. How could they possibly say such a thing? In fact, Galileo went and took his telescope to Rome and offered to let people look through the telescope at Jupiter so they could see what he was seeing. And the authorities told people not to do it. It was a trick. It was not a real instrument. It was some kind of a trickery, that when they would be looking in the telescope, they would be fooled by some kind of fake imagery in there. Right? Don't look at things that we don't believe in. Don't be fooled. We believe this, and we hold on to this belief, and we hold on to it so dearly that even evidence that comes into the picture that doesn't agree with us, we dismiss that. That's fake. And it took hundreds of years. It took hundreds of years for people to take a step away. And people still haven't taken a complete step away from it. You know, there are people today who tell us that some of the things that we see in science are not real or not true, because it disagrees with that which they already believe, you see. So what happened is, over hundreds of years, what happened is the authorities finally came to say, okay, the earth does circle the sun. The earth isn't the center of the universe, but mankind is still the pinnacle of God's creation. They just made a very small shift in consciousness, but it took hundreds of years to get there. Right? So that's the importance of this. This is why you and I have to do it for ourselves. We can't wait for collective consciousness to slowly evolve, because we will be long gone before any progress is made in that regard here. But you and I, we can make progress of our own if we will be earnest, if we will be assertive and aggressive about it. And that is, by that I don't mean fighting or struggling. I mean recognizing that this is our responsibility, and we are going to do it, because we are the only ones that can do it. So I briefly mentioned these last week, and we will come back to them today. Right? So the first thing that comes up is this belief in duality. This belief in duality. Two powers. There's a power for good, and there's a power for evil. Now, the problem of evil is a theological problem that philosophies and religions have tried to address. I personally believe that you can learn more about what any particular belief system holds at the center of their belief by asking the simple question, where does evil come from? Where does evil come from? The book of Job is, by some scholars, the oldest book in the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. it was written first. And to me, that makes intellectual sense because it deals with the most important problem of life. Where does evil come from? If there's this thing called God, then where does evil come from? See, we as human beings, we can ask these questions. We don't know yet that any other creatures do. And it's interesting, I just saw a picture on the internet where they were comparing the brain of a dolphin against the brain of a human being. And the dolphins have bigger and more complex brains than human beings do. But as far as we know, they don't have a self-consciousness, a self-awareness as we do. They may, and we just don't know it. But we as human beings, we can start to ask these questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? You know, where am I going? Right? We can look at life and we can look back in history and say, oh, you know, there was a time before I was here. And then we can project forward and say, well, there's going to be a time after I'm gone. And then the natural question is, well, where did I come from? And where am I going? See? We can start to contemplate these deeper questions in life that, as far as we know, other creatures cannot do. And then we can go even further and start to ask ourselves, you know, who am I? What is this thing called thought? We can become aware of what we're thinking, or we can become aware of what thoughts are passing through our field of consciousness. And then we can ask if I am the one thinking the thought or if I'm the one becoming aware of the thought. We can do all of these things within our own consciousness. And this, I believe, is when we start to enter what Troward calls the fifth kingdom, the spiritual kingdom. When we were studying Jewish mysticism, the rabbi was talking about in that belief system there is the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, and the speaker. And the speaker would be this spiritually awakening being that we're talking about. And if you look at society around us, we spend a great deal of time talking about, writing about, singing about, making movies about, and doing all of the things that come very, very naturally to the creatures in the forest, to the creatures in the sea. You know? How much of our time is preoccupied with struggle and survival, and yet there's that within the creatures that knows what to do to survive. How much of our time and our literature and poems and songs have to do with reproduction, and yet this is something the animals do quite innocently, quite naturally, without spending a great deal of time talking about it. And how much of our time is spent with power and control and who is going to dominate and who is going to win, right? Win, competition. And the animals don't seem to spend a lot of time worrying about that. Yes, they are active. Yes, some animals will capture and eat other animals, but they don't seem to be spending their entire day talking about it, thinking about it. So in that regard, we as human beings, we have to take our consciousness out of that. In the realm of the chakra system, we have to move at least into the fourth chakra, to the heart. We have to move out of the first three because that's where all of life is. But where we start to become different is when we can start to come to the heart, and then to self-expression, and then to intuition, and then to spiritual awareness. But we have to decide that this is what we want to do. So one of the things when with this problem of evil, when people started to say, well, you know, why do bad things happen to good people, as Rabbi Kushner put in his book, right, which is his exposition of the book of Job. When bad things happen to good people. And a lot of the human consciousness has come up with this idea that there must be two powers. It's kind of like Moriarty to Holmes, you know. Sherlock Holmes says, you don't think school buses just run off the road by themselves. There must be a Moriarty making it happen. And we have this idea of good and evil. And a lot of this comes to us from Zoroastrianism, from Persia, where there was a prince of light and a prince of darkness, and they were engaged in this struggle. The prince of light was stronger than the prince of darkness, but for some reason allowed the prince of darkness to exist. And in the end time, in the final battle, the prince of light would win. This permeates our society. This idea permeates our society, that somehow there is this God who is good, who allows this thing called evil to exist. And there are two powers. There are two powers. We got sick because we're being punished. We got sick because we need to learn a lesson, see? That somehow these things that we recognize as being evil, anti-life, against life, right? Evil is live backwards. That somehow these things come from that which is good. And yet we're told in the New Testament, that the same well does not give forth sweet and sour water. Jesus is telling people, you need to get rid of these old ideas. You can't put new wine into old skin. These ideas are so new that you can't put them in with what you've been thinking, because your thinking is wrong. Your thinking is confused, and you have to break out of this confused thinking. So Emma Hopkins asks us to consider, where in our thinking do we believe that there is a mixture of evil in our idea of good? And she tells us to affirm, there is no mixture of evil in my idea of good. There is no mixture of evil in my idea of good. There are not two powers, one for good and one for evil. There is only one power. There's only unity. There is only a unity in all of life. There is only one. Only one. Think about that. How much of the trouble that we experience in our own lives, and how much of the experience of the trouble that we see in the world, comes from this idea of separation, comes from this idea of duality. Soldiers are sent off to war to kill the enemy because the enemy's not like us, you see. They're not like us at all. And of course, later on we find out that they're just like us. Just like us. They're human beings just like us. So what we want to do then is, as you go through the day, as you go through your day, I invite you to, as your thoughts come to you, as ideas come to you from the TV and from the radio, from the newspapers, I want you to ask yourself, is that an idea of unity? Or is that an idea of duality? Is that an idea of duality? As you start to contemplate what it is you wish to experience in your life, ask yourself, what do I think has to happen in order for me to experience that? And you'll start to identify these areas in your life where you have put something else. You are separated from that oneness by something else. By something else. We got to remove those barriers. We have to remove those ideas of separation. What is the good that you wish to have happen in your life now? What is that good? And what do you think has to happen in order for you to experience that? And what that's going to bring up for you naturally is all of these ideas of separation. And then you can remove them. Neti, neti, not this, not that. Get thee behind me, Satan. There's only one power. There is only one life. Do we believe that this one power and this one life, do we believe that it withholds something from us? That is an idea of duality. That is an idea that has created God in the image and likeness of men. That God is just like an old cranky king sitting on a throne who gives to some and takes from another. Santa Claus concept of God. Who's naughty, who's nice. Give and withhold, is angry, has enemies. We've got to go back and re-examine those ideas. See? There's no separation. There is no separation. The second thing she asks us to consider, and we talked about this briefly last week, is the ability of matter. First of all, that matter as itself is not separate from, different than spirit, this thing we call spirit, and it doesn't have any power over itself. It doesn't have power to create itself. And this is a very important one for us as well, particularly when it comes into areas of healing and physical health. Matter does not have the ability to make itself sick. Matter does not have the ability to make itself well. Matter does not have the ability to form itself. It just is. It just is. Right? The principal property of matter is inertia. It just is. And we tend to think of it as real and as solid, and then we find out, well, it's not real and solid. It's protons, electrons, and neutrons, and then we find out that even below that we go into subatomic particles. In quantum physics, they tell us the subatomic particles may be there or may not be there or probably there. And then we get into this discussion, well, at the subatomic level it works this way, but at the bigger level it works that way. And there's this whole big discussion. And what we have to do as spiritual beings is go back and ask ourselves, where did the matter come from? Where did matter come from? Did matter create itself? And I tell people this is the only question you're ever going to have to ask and answer in your spiritual development. Is, did consciousness create matter, or did matter create consciousness? Did matter somehow get itself together and organize itself and then form this thing called the brain, and consciousness is a function of the brain? Or did consciousness create matter as an instrument to use? That's the fundamental question that we're going to have to ask and answer. And what we have to do is catch ourselves as we're growing and find out when we believe, when what we're saying and what we're doing and what we're thinking indicates that we believe that matter has some power of its own. There's no such thing as sickness in matter. There's no such thing as disease in matter. Everything that we know is this invisible energy coming in and taking form of matter and then giving up form and going back to energy. So if everything is energy coming into form as matter, what is it that directs the energy? What is it that moves the energy? Remember a few years ago they were looking for the God particle? Higgs boson particle, maybe it was called. A particle that causes the energy to become matter. And people were saying, well, see, if we can find that particle, then it means we don't need a God. And of course, all you're going to do is ask the next question, which is, well, where did the particle come from? See, there's always that unknown. We're always kind of going into that unknown. But if energy is becoming matter, what is it that causes the energy to become matter? What is it that directs the energy to take a particular form? And we would say it's consciousness, right? This is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. So in our lives, when we start to think of things, we need to ask ourselves, are we giving power to matter that matter doesn't have? In order to have a healing, do we expect matter to do something in order for that healing to take place? Or do we expect a shift in consciousness to give direction to the energy which is taking the form of the matter in order for that healing to take place? You see, everything is spiritual. You want to come back to, there's only one power, and it is a spiritual power. That's where you want to get. That's where you want to get. This is why Raymond Charles Barker, for example, tells us that money is God in action. Or, yeah, money is God in action. We think of money, it's paper, it's ink, it has numbers on it, and those things. We think it's matter, we think it's tangible, but we have to remember what it represents, what it really is. It is energy coming into our experience at a time that is appropriate. When we start to think of it that way, then it can come to us from many different ways, many different paths. If we think that it is matter and it has to come through us through material means, then it is limited to how it can get to us. Where do you think that matter is real and matter has power? Where have you lost sight of the fact that everything is spiritual energy taking form. The next idea is a big one, which is absence. There is no absence. So it's easy for us sometimes to believe that God is good, and God is smart, and God is powerful, and God is all these things, but God is out there somewhere. And not where we are. Not living life as us, not living life through us. So we might say, well, yeah, God knows how to do this, but I don't. And that is the old race consciousness in the belief of absence, right? And being kicked out of the garden is a belief in absence. As Joni Mitchell said, we're all trying to get our way back into the garden. We might look at someone we don't like and we might think that, surely God is not present in them. We might look at some terrible situation in our life and wonder, where was God when this happened? And all of these things are manifestations of the idea of absence. And we have to move beyond that idea of absence. There is only God, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, right wherever we think the appearance of lack or limitation or evil might be. There's only God. There's only God. We want to bring ourselves back to that. So watch yourself, particularly when you're watching news and somebody comes on and says something you completely disagree with, and it might be very easy for us to say, when God was handing out brains, that person was standing behind the door. That's our belief in absence. We got to get away from that. Got to get away from that. We come down then to this idea of hate or struggle. Now, hate is that which we hate, we are afraid of. And we believe in the need of struggle. Our whole society believes in the need of struggle. Our whole society is based on this idea that if you just work hard enough at it, you'll get it. And if it comes to you too easily, it's not worth having. That's the belief in the necessity of struggle. God doesn't struggle. There's nothing for God to be afraid of. There is nothing for God to hate. So whenever we find ourselves extremely angry, we find ourselves hating something, we finding ourselves wanting to fight and thrash and go punch it in the nose, whatever it happens to be, we've got to stop and say that is a belief in the necessity of hate. That is a belief in the necessity of struggle. And I let go of that. And the last one is kind of follows from the other. There is no such thing as sin. There is no such thing as sickness. There is no such thing as death. God knows nothing of sin. God has never been sick a day. God was never born. God will never die. What am I? What am I? I am spirit. I am spirit. These things are not necessary. They are experiences that human beings have, but they are not necessary. We were never born. We will never die. There is that part of us which has never been sick a day. There is no one keeping score over the decisions we make. We get to live the outpicturing of our decisions. But sin in itself has no power other than that of error. Other than that of our erroneous thoughts, beliefs, and actions, or karma, as the Tibetan Buddhist might say. As long as we persist in the wrong way of thinking, we continue to reap the natural outpicturing of that wrong way of believing. But it's not real. It doesn't have the power to sustain itself. Right? And that's what we mean by that. Evil's an experience, but not a power. It doesn't have the power to sustain itself. So when we find ourselves believing in a necessity, right, this is what I said before, we would say, well, God sent us this sickness to teach us a lesson. No, the divine doesn't know anything about sickness. The divine doesn't know that you need to learn a lesson. It just knows that it is expressing its life as you and through you to the degree that you provide the opening. And what this is all about is clearing the stuff out of the opening. And so every time there's a big rain coming, they send out the crews and they clean out the they clean out the drains to provide an opening for the water to come off the street. So what we're doing here is we are going in and we are cleaning out our consciousness, and the way that we are doing that is we are becoming aware of the delusions of mind, and we are reminding ourselves persistently of the truth that there's only one life, and that life is God. See, all of these things that we talk about come back to this idea of separation. Is God out there okay, and us down here having a tough time of it? There's only one life. There's only one life. Now, those are the five delusions of mind, or the five denials, as Emma Curtis Hopkins would talk about, that all of humanity kind of shares. And there's two more, and all of humanity shares the additional two, but they're more personal to us. There's something that we can do more personally ourselves. And this gets back to this idea that when Adam and Eve left the garden, there were cherubim, angelic creatures with swords that turned in every direction. And they were placed at the gate of the garden, only the eastern gate. We have to figure out why. But they were placed at the gate in order to keep humanity from finding its way back to the tree of life, right? Now, in Buddhism, you have a very similar imagery. You have the Buddha is sitting in a cave in a deep meditative state, and he's holding out his hand with his palm facing out, kind of like a crossing guard might hold up their hand to stop traffic. And outside the cave, there are these two gruesome creatures, ugly creatures, kind of similar to the cherubim. And what this is telling us is that this peace that we're looking for, this tree of life, this stillness, this awareness of the presence, this experience of the presence of God, which is kind of as far as we know for now, the end game of our spiritual growth. That there's two things there that are keeping us from it, and they represent our fears and our attachments. Our fears and our attachments. Right? So remember I said there's nothing to hate, there's nothing to struggle against, there's nothing to fear. Whatever we're afraid of, we are separate from. Whatever we're afraid of, we are different than, you see. So in our growth, by overcoming our fears, by identifying those areas where we hate and eliminating them from our consciousness, we are removing one of the major barriers. And then the other is our attachments, and our attachments kind of come down to our belief in the reality of matter. Our money, our houses, our possessions, our friends, our families, all of those things. And what we have to come to understand is that all of those things are passing. Everything that is around you and I right now is turning to dust. Everyone that is around us right now is turning to dust. Because this is a temporary experience. We are all just passing through. But we can't get into the gate. We can't get into the cave, into the stillness, as long as we are believing in the reality of matter, as long as we are attached to the reality of matter. You know, it's as Augustine said, "Oh Lord, make me good, but not yet, not yet, not yet ready to give up the attachment to his ways of the world that he outlined in his Confessions." Our material comforts, our opinions, right? Our prejudices, all of the things that we hold on to, that we're so attached to. And we have to let go of them. We have to let go of them. In some of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, what they do with the young monks is they have them go out and sit at the burning grounds where the bodies are cremated, and they have them sit there and meditate for days or longer on the cremations, until they really get it in their head to let go. To let go. Let go of attachments. Let go of attachments. So our opportunity then is to catch ourselves being human and remind ourselves that we are spiritual. to catch ourselves when we are fully vested and bought into one of these limiting ideas, these delusions of mind, and to let them go. There is only one life. There's only one life. And that life is expressing itself in, as, and through you. And it is perfect in every way. It is not dependent on material things. It just is. And what we want to do is we want to break through these delusions of mind. We want to let go of these delusions of mind until we are at home with the beloved. In that stillness represented in the cave with the Buddha, till we are eating from the tree of life again. And so it is.